Hi, I'm Frances LaCuesta, and you're listening to Big Impact Women. This podcast explores what it's like to live life in purpose, to discover our unique gifts, and be a contribution to the world. Each episode features conversations with courageous women thought leaders, spiritual teachers, authors, artists, and social entrepreneurs on making an impact with their work, navigating through the challenges and struggles they face in their lives, and the lessons they learned from these experiences.
The understanding of heart space is a gentle holding space where all feelings, thoughts, and sensations are welcome. So it is a space where we can have a loving relationship with our complexity and contradiction. So no pushing or pulling, just is.
Christine Samuel is a curious explorer who finds delight in experiencing the unknown and sharing her ever-growing understanding of living from the heart space. She left her 20 years of a corporate career to follow her heart's path with a mission to be a living example and create a nurturing space for others in their journey of self-discovery and transition through coaching, inner work training, and facilitation. Here's my conversation with Christine Samuel. So, hi, Christine. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Frances. Thank you for inviting me. It's such an honor to be here with you.
Of course. So, I just want to go and dive into the interview portion now. When I was reading about your story and preparing for this, I can't help but relate to it. So you came to Canada from Indonesia, without a lot of resources, right? Financially, emotionally, right? You left your family and the life that you know behind to start a new one. Mm-hmm. Now, as an immigrant myself, I can relate so much to that story. But can you tell us what that journey was like for you?
Looking back, I'm glad I did it. But there's a time where I thought, wow, that's such a naive, a naive move, right? But I think that's, and again, we only can make sense of everything through looking back. And I thought it's because I think there's already a calling for me to go away. And I think that's been my journey to kind of go away and then reflect and question, not in a bad way, but like questioning who I am, why I'm here for. And through my journey, like moving away from my family, like from the other side of the world, and then moving away from corporate career is where my tremendous growth came from. The reason why, because, as we grew up, we always have this people around us start labeling us, right? Like as a kid,
Yes,
I was labeled as clumsy because when I grew up, those in the 70s, where in Asia, you cannot use your left hand. You have to use your right hand to do things, or to communicate or to shake other people's hand. But I was left-handed. So living with big families and cousins and relatives, people said, "Don't use your left hand, use your right hand." So as a 4 or 5 years old girl, like I get confused because when I use my right hand, then I start breaking stuff like glasses, plate, because my brain was confused. Then I start getting labeled as clumsy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I believe. I didn't trust myself. So, and then, a lot of other things about culture, right? Like what is beautiful in certain culture is different than the other culture. By I always have the longing to, even when I was in junior high, to kind of like my life is somewhere out there, but I didn't. It's more like along the way than I found out. But moving away, it's like being by myself again. I gone through a lot of in a way suffering, because it's very lonely, it's alone. But I think that is the part where I can look at my own resources inner, right? Because otherwise, like, I always can depend on my family, depends on my skill, depends on my experience. but but when it's not there anymore, when things are, the outside doesn't cannot really you cannot really depend on the outside, you have to go inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I think looking back, that's been my journey to, to be kind of pulled from things that I know to something unknown, and then start again. Anyway, I hope that's answered.
Yeah. So that's really beautiful. And you talk about, how growing up, being I mean, culturally, and I can relate to that as well. It's also being labeled, right? So on your end, it's about being clumsy. Me, I was labeled as somebody who is quiet because I don't talk as much. And I didn't, of course, understand at like 4 or 5 years old that I was, being introverted. And I thought that it was, that there was something wrong with me because
Yeah.
I cannot express myself the same way that my siblings can,
Yeah.
for the more extroverted, more, extroverted siblings that I have. And growing up as that, labeled that in being, of course, in a culture wherein I am also told to be, in order to be successful in life, you have to be a doctor, to be in the medical field, to be an engineer and stuff like that. But I was more of like an artist, so I didn't want to have anything to do with the medical profession. So I guess with what your story is like, being able to move bravely, right?
Yes.
Knowing that you might say it's like, oh, it's kind of naive during that time, but then maybe during that time it made so much sense because your body, mind, heart is like telling you that this is no longer the place for you.
Yes. And this is the thing about, we're gonna talk about it later about the moving to heart space. It's like we have desire to be useful, we have desire to make difference, we have desire to use our gifts, and at the same time we are very influenced by what the culture believe, right? Like you said about when we are labeled, we said, oh, there's something wrong with me. And then one thing that is very strong in me, I think you probably experience it too, the culture where to be successful you have to work hard.
Yes.
Right. So is that true? It's that's something that I kind of opening up right now. But it is the way how can we really take a look at ourselves and differentiate between who we are and what we've been conditioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that discovery of that is like doing the inner work, which you also mentioned that in times when it's been a struggle or we go through something that is challenging or difficult, that's actually the time that we also begin to understand, right? A huge chunk of maybe trying to make sense of what life wants from us. And of course, we don't want to be in that space, right? We don't want to be always in a difficult spot.
It's
right?
uncomfortable. Yeah.
It is. But when we are going through that, we learn from it.
Yes.
So I know that part of your story is you also discovering that you have high functioning anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
having to work and navigate through that as well. And you also mentioned about having an autoimmune disease
Mm-hmm.
and how you overcame that. So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the high functioning anxiety is pretty interesting because so the story was I moved up my career ladder, and one day I was I live in Toronto, and I had to lead executive um, design workshops um, in Cupertino. It's a And then it's all up to me, right? Like I'm the facilitator lead, and as what come to me is like I know with my clumsiness what I believe inside.
Mm-hmm.
If I hold something, I'm gonna screw it up. It's things fault, right? So I'm just worried. I was so worried that I'm gonna screw this up. And what happened is I I was so stressed out, and I started developing like a rash that I never had before.
Oh, wow.
Like maybe a night before before the workshops. And what happened is then I went for a run, a jog around the hotels. I came back and I start doing journaling, and I realized what happened. So I went back and figured out that it's basically my inner, we all have developmental trauma. So going back to that is like, oh, this is not, I thought that's who I am. So I realized that before I thought that's the way I was, but I realized it's not. It's because of my childhood experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I was at that moment I realized, this is my trauma acting out, right? So I have some kind of dialogue with my inner child and say, it's okay, you can rest, because I'm adult now,
Mm-hmm.
right? I moved from different countries, start my career. Like, oh yeah, I realize I'm okay. Like I'm not really screwed up. Um, and so then the realizations that, oh, okay, this is that high functioning anxiety is coming from that childhood experience where I never really trust myself, because I'm everything that I hold, that I have ownership, I was worried I'm gonna screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So being able to differentiate between, oh, that's just my past life, um, part of the trauma, and this is me, and being able to see, look, this, I've done this, I moved to different countries, I work really hard, and I manage. um, that means I'm not that person anymore. That's just
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I starting to know that is, and also I've been reading a lot of stuff that is a high functioning anxieties. Another thing about the autoimmune disease is because of that stress, because like my tension in my body was like, it's always tension, because like I try not to mess things up, right? Even though from outside it looks, I look very calm. Um, and from there I start to realize, hey, there's something that I need to do about this. So I read a lot of alternative medicines, um, acupuncture, reflexologies, um, Chinese traditional medicines, work on my diet, work on meditations, um, work more on my inner self, work on psychology. Um, and through that, I get to know myself. I get to know how to do self-care, to take care of myself more, to get to know, when I feel something, because before it's like, I don't know what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's tense. I just want to go further, right? Faster. But it's allow me, not like right away, but slowly to know, oh, there's something that I need, that I need to pay attention to.
I think it's also important to have this, like, having a growth mindset to not back down, not in a sense that to strive or to push, but really having that, seeing that what you've went through or what we go through in life is that something that's teaching us. So, and then how do we apply that? Right now that I know, how do we apply that? So it's that continuous also, asking questions, asking the right questions. And you mentioned about growing up and then being labeled as someone who is clumsy. And then, as a grown up, you still have that part of you that's acting that out. And then asking the question, is this true? Am I still that clumsy 5-year-old that, that I used to be? And seeing that, no, I'm not, and challenging it at the same time, that I'm no longer that person. I was a child. I didn't know any better. So I think it's important to look at that way, that we are no longer our childhood traumas. But if we are traumatized, and a lot of us are, now how do we move from that? Right. And in the same way, how do we use that traumatic experience to helping others, or to be like, who are we called here to be? So, I mean, I think it's evolving it. How do we evolve the trauma into something that is, and how to unwound ourselves? So, okay, I'm just like thinking aloud here.
I love your questions. And I think that's, when you see, we so dualistic, right? In our intellect and analytical mind, we always want to label something. We want to structure something so we understand. When we understand, we feel in control, right? So by labeling is good or bad, and we limit ourselves. But that's the thing. The only way we can see everything makes sense is not like it's not at the moment when we feel uncertainty, right? When we don't know. It's not, because that's what we always do. Our intellectual brain always go into trying to make a story when things doesn't make sense. But sense making happens when we look back. So I met a lot of women, and those women who are like very driven, doing their, like, living their purpose, it's coming, usually the purpose coming from their suffering in the past, right? Trauma.
Yeah.
And they want to help people who was themselves at one time doing experience those trauma. And I think that's the beauty of humanity. It's like, it's not, everything is not like beautiful and successful and smooth. It is in those suffering, in those pain, in those challenges that it's the learning, it's a different kind of school methodology, right? In life, that lesson that we learn usually coming from challenges, not coming from smooth, sailing time. So how can we see that as an opportunity instead of something that block us? Because even in our feeling that we feel, worries or frustrations, overwhelmed, whatever we feel, it's actually an invitation, right? If we can see an invitation in our challenge, what is the invitation here? We ask that, like I said, what is the invitation? Then we get away from this trying to fix things, because that's our tendency. It's wrong, good or bad. It's bad. Therefore, let's fix it. Is it according to my expectation? It doesn't go according to my expectation. That's right? Because we have this, a lot of our life is anticipation of what happened. And to anticipate, we make prediction. And that is coming from, expectation, judgment. But when
Yeah.
we allow and we say, okay, this is what I feel right now. I feel challenged. I do expecting it didn't happen, because sometimes we cannot help it. But we can say, okay, what's the invitation here? And through that question, we find the answer. So I love where you're going, because in a way, what I found, like this couple of years, even especially this year since, or last year since COVID, we're not here to fix or solve problem. Like, this is the thing about, right, in the professional world, we become professional to fix others people's problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we see problem first. What's the problem? And that's our tendency, our survival bias. What's the problem? Let's fix it. But actually, it's more about seeing it and being with it, so we can have a gift that comes from it. And through that gift, we expand and evolve. And sometimes, especially, if all of you people who are listening in here, who are in their path of transitions, of wanting to do what really meant in their life, and they're in, not knowing what to do, is what we are asked to be is to be present and to becoming to know. That's the different thing. When we're not sure, is not for us to let's solve it, let's get away from it, let's find strategy. Is to slow down and to create a space to become know. Because when we becoming knowing, is meaning that we open to what's emerging.
Right.
Because otherwise we're like, okay, we go back to this amazing analytical mind, because most of us get paid, compensated financially, because we do things that we repeat well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, the better you are in what you repeat,
Yeah.
the more money you get. So we get used to repeating. We use methodology at work to do something, right? We sell our service because we have this proven methodology, and we look at pattern that familiar that, and apply the methodologies. But in life, it's organic. It's not like in a lab or in a certain things that you can kind of take everything out and just focus on that. It's all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So in moving to something that unknown, which is called progress and possibilities, we need to be able to allow and to create a space where we are fine with not knowing. And I think that's where I'm, going back to my journey, is like when I'm moving from Indonesia and coming here, not knowing the culture, not knowing everything. When I decided, this is it. I gonna leave my corporate career and do something that very close to my heart, not knowing, because I know
Yeah.
I'm preparing myself, learning marketings and learning all the technique and how to like this proven strategy, but never it didn't feel effective for me, because
Yeah.
I was too afraid, and I was too want to make sure that it goes well. I
Yeah.
am afraid of failing. I'm afraid of, what if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? And when I'm in that situation, I'm paralyzed. I cannot do anything, right? And
Yeah.
in organization, you have team that can help you. You can specialize in one thing, but in life, or things that what you're going to do, you've never done before, that's a different ball game. There's so much you don't know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyhow.
I just wanted to go back to the question you actually asked. It's what's the invitation here? I think there's for those who are going through a lot of struggle, especially during these times. I mean, there's just a lot of grief and loss, heartbreak, that's
Mhm.
been experienced. And I just love that question. Perhaps, in moments like this, to ask, like, what's the invitation for me here in this moment? Or
Mhm.
what unravels, what's opening up?
Mhm.
And also what's emerging, right? So you mentioned about the unknown, you mentioned about uncertainty. But yeah, as humans, I think we are wired to want something that is certain, because otherwise it's going to be a threat to
Yes.
our right, to our survival, right? So
Yes.
so it's what is out there, is it going to harm us,
Yes.
harm me or not? And that's very understandable.
Mhm.
Now, I guess I want to touch on and you mentioned this a little bit, like early this year. So you made a bold move of actually leaving 20 years of your corporate career into a journey into the unknown. And you're talking a little bit about that. So, but what led you from taking that leap, from a safe and secure corporate job that's providing you into a path of uncertainty?
Mm. Um, I spent in, I felt like in this painful place where I think most of us feel this way when we know our purpose is something else, when we know there's something more to life than doing repetitions of, what we're good at. Um, and I've been thinking about that um, many years, but I'm too scared. I'm too scared to get out of it because it's nice to have paycheck every two
Already.
weeks,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I have mortgage, I have family to feed, um, so it's hard. Um, and and I think in a way, like when I look back on things that I sometimes we need to be pushed, right? And I think COVID pushed that. COVID pushed that.
Mm.
Um, in the last part of my corporate career, there was something happened that is really really make me see things, like really open my eyes um, how sometimes how much fear dominated into workspace, um, and how fear is in the systems and create looking us not as human but as a more like you got to fit here in this puzzle. And I start seeing like sometimes in you know in this in like all organization in the world, all institutions and everything about the culture itself is, if you want to be successful, fit in. If you can fit our need in this puzzle, you'll be successful. Because if it doesn't fit, you fail. It doesn't function well. But what happened is, because of we learned to fit in, even since our childhood, right? Like 5 years old, be quiet, don't play outside, or like be in the group of people, behave this way, otherwise you get there's some consequence, which is it works, right? It's the way we learn to be with others in the societies. But what happened is we um, we lost our willingness. We put aside our willingness in order to, and then we live by obligation, right? So you've got paid this much. Your hours are for because you've been paid, and this is what you work. And sometimes it's great, we love having the opportunities, and it's challenging. It gives us satisfaction, um, fulfillment, but sometimes it doesn't, because if we do the same thing over and over again, like all all human, we want growth, and we want something different, and our feelings, our mood are changing every time. So, and sometimes we grow, but our work doesn't grow, keep us in that place, right?
Mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
think that's many things. And then what we do is we close down ourselves, because we gotta perform. We cannot afford not to perform well. So what we do is we cut off our willingness, and we just push ourselves for the sake of obligations. So we live, we do things, we perform based on obligations. And we never asked ourselves, are you willing? Are you willing to do this?
What comes out is the question, like, where are you sourcing it from? So in work, or in the purpose or calling that you have in life, is asking the question also, like, where am I sourcing this from? Is it coming from love? Is it coming from fear? And if it's coming from love, and I think that's where the willingness comes in. And despite all of the challenges and difficulties that you will, of course, encounter, I'm sourcing it from this place of deep love, and that I am committed to making it happen no matter what happens along the way. So that's what I'm hearing from you. And I believe that, that COVID really was that great, catalyst to bring people to actually, come to their senses and ask the question. I think a lot of people are asking the question of, what is this life for? Right? What am I doing this for? And I think that there is even a term for that, right? So the great resignation, like people just, leaving their jobs and just really taking it from here, that, hey, if, life is short, and here's what I'm willing to do at this time. And I know it might be that turning my back on something that is safe and secure, but I only have, this life to live, and I'm willing to do something that will make me happy, or do something that is purposeful. And one of the other things that actually reminds me of is, I have this book from Parker Palmer. So it's called Courage to Teach. And there is a quote there that he included from Frederick Buechner. And he said that, so I have this book here beside me because I just absolutely love it. So from Frederick Buechner, he said that vocation for him is like heart's path, right? So what is your calling? What is that purpose? So he said, vocation is a place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meets.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It is, right? So Parker Palmer actually said that, if a work is something that is mine to do, it will make me glad over the long haul, despite the difficult days. So I relate this to what you said about the willingness and the commitment. And he also asked this question, what brings more security in the long run? Is it holding this job or honoring my soul? Mm-hmm. And that really hits me each time when I think about, but then, what am I going to do if, there's bills to pay? There's like all of this stuff that it's like, there's a long list of things that we have to out of obligation.
Yes.
But it's also coming back into that, okay, so am I, is it holding this job, but am I also honoring my soul? And that leads me to, to one other thing that I wanted to ask you. Like right now, while there are people who can say that, hey, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to do something that I wanted to do for a long time. But there are also other people who are, I can't do this yet, right? Yet. And even if I wanted to leave this job to pursue something that I've been wanting to do, or leave this relationship that's no longer working, or leave a life, an old life behind, right? But I'm not yet in that space. Now, how do you think can they work with what they have at the moment and still be true to what they want? So being in between, like, what can you say about
I
that?
love your questions. That's a great questions. And first of all, I just want to say, I know how, uncomfortable it is to be in that situation, because I've been there before. And I want to answer that from this place, from the place I am now, looking back, right? Like from the place you are now, things doesn't make sense. You want to get out of it. You want to do it as soon as possible, and how everything is miserable because you cannot do what you want, stuff like that. But I'm gonna answer it from this place now. Honor wherever you are, and it's okay to be where you are now. It's okay to be not ready now, because what happened is, if you believe and if you keep following your longing, like if you're not putting yourself in conflict, saying this or that, right, either this or that, then I think that's the most miserable way, when our mind is saying you got to pick this or that. And if it's great if you can pick the other one you want, but if you cannot at this moment because of the obligation, which is still important, we have some, things that we need to fulfill, it's gonna be miserable. So what my suggestion is this: it's not this or that. Even in your work, even in the place, in the relationship, in the workplace where you are in, that you cannot let go, you still can do things that according to your heart, right? Because this is the thing, our brain always said, here how it looks like when I follow my heart, here how it looks like when I don't follow my heart. And sometimes we just should like ignore that. Right. It's very black and white, and life is not black and white. So for example, like just things that you do with the podcasts, just follow your heart, right? Maybe you still have to, obligation, do work. They just follow your heart and enjoying that moment when you follow. And what happens is, it's going to propel you to get out. Like it's going to create an opportunity. It's going to create ways to moving closely to where you want to be. And it gives you that readiness, because I was not ready 2 years ago, even though I wanted so much. And things that happened to me last year, including COVID, is really the ones that gave me readiness. And another thing is, sometimes when we are in this situation, in transition or wanting to transition, we always felt it is our effort. We need to do something. If we don't do something, things doesn't happen, right? That's in everything, right? Work hard, survival. But actually, you're not alone. If you really want to follow your heart, everything, like the universe works behind your back. And if you can allow that if this is your sole purpose, and you keep believing in that and keep like holding it gently, right? Like dropping into it, even though the situation maybe doesn't feel going there, trusting that everything works out. Like you working on your part, right? Because we do have to work on our part, but like there's things outside of ourselves working for that purpose too. Because if it's not a selfish purpose, I want to, have seven figures, this. But if it's more like a purposeful that is that interconnect and level up our humanities, you're not working alone. Never working alone that way. So if you can trust that, and also, the other thing is I found there's two things. Purpose, right? Or like, I need to do this. This is my sole purpose. It feels like it's higher self, it's higher thing. It's a higher goal that sometimes it's hard to achieve because it's very far out there than we are right now. We're like having a lot of things to fix or feels not enough. But at the same time, also don't take ourselves seriously. You know what I mean? Like, play. Just be here and play. So having that higher purpose sometimes get us into this, this is unachievable because we still have, it's not enough. I need to be prepared. I need to do something. I need to always grow myself, right? Learn new things. And then we stuck in that circle of like, okay, I need to prepare, I need to do something more so that I can get ready, right? So if we just don't take ourselves seriously and just play it, like, like kids never. And there's another thing is, this is the thing about adult, right? That cut us off from our heart. We do something because if we do something, then something else happens. Like I work so that I get paid, so that I can take vacation. When I take vacation, I can enjoy myself. You see how many layers to enjoy yourself
before enjoy yourself.
Right? It's like this is the game, the mind game that we all adult play. To do something, therefore we're gonna have to go to this touch point and this, therefore then gonna get our goal. But kids never do that. When you go to play in playground, they just play because they want to play. They create, they draw because they draw. It's not like, because if I draw now, then my skill gonna get better. If I draw more, then maybe that one day I can become an artist and I get nothing of that. It's like they want it because their heart desires want it.
What I'm hearing here is that to just trusting in the emergence of things, and it releases us from suffering, right? It releases us from misery, because when we trust, it allows us to have that space also, for something, maybe creativity, inviting creativity, right, to happen, and just whatever, allow life to surprise us. So I think that's what I'm hearing from you. And you mentioned about heart space, and I want to go to that, lead this conversation to that. You have this, I know you teach people also how to move from the head space to the heart space. Right now, this is a theory that a lot of people, right, know, right, what that is. Like, okay, I have to, like, from my heart, from intuition. But then we live in our heads pretty much all the time. And it's about doing, going, taking action. And then, and it gives us a lot also of that suffering. Now, how do you move? So maybe give us like 2 to 3 things, if there's any takeaway that the listeners can have, like, how do you move from your headspace to the heart space?
First of all, I want to explain why heart space. I know everyone know like heart, coming to your heart, like speaking from your heart, doing from your heart. It's because for me, the understanding of heart space is a gentle holding space where all feelings, thoughts, and sensations are welcome. So it is a space where we can have a loving relationship with our complexity and contradiction. So no pushing or pulling, just is. Right? Because through that deliberately gentle holding, a different kind of intelligence and clarity can emerge. So the reason why it's heart space, maybe it could be a concept, it could be a metaphorical. I mean, we still use our mind in a way, but the idea is like, if we change the way we think, right? This is about thinking is, but the head is either this or that. So when you have uncomfortable feeling, what happens is it wants to go fast as it can because it doesn't want to feel it. We need a space where, because we are very multi-layered being. We're not just one. We're not just, when I tell you I'm Christine, it's just a name, a label. But there's so much dimension about me that you don't know just by knowing my name, right? Same thing. There's so much thing that we label in our head about how things work about ourselves that beyond what it is. So in me, for example, I have part of me that wants freedom, wants creativity, but I also have part of me that wanting control. Right? We do have that in some degrees. So how can part of me that want to be in strict control and control have good relationship with part of me that want the freedom? Therefore, we need a space where it can contain all of it, and our hearts are bigger enough to hold that than our head, because our head always want to get some conclusions. So the first thing to return to the heart is to slow down, right? Slowing down, and to learn not to fix problem, but to allow this, to trust, right? It's the way to go to the heart is to learn to trust. And as the thing is, when we learn to trust, we start having a peripheral vision instead of a narrow focus. In analytical way of seeing things, it's very narrow focus. So the idea about trust is like opening your peripheral so you can see more things and contain more things. But when our intellectual mind seeing things like taking a picture, taking a shot, like a fish, and then I see this and I compare the shot that I take maybe 2 years ago or even yesterday to whatever happened. So it's dead. It's not alive. It's not relational, because you take something that is freezing, that is stopped, right? But in relation, everything moves at the same time, always moving. So the idea is, how can we trust and being able to move back and seeing all the relational, and then it starts with trust. So if you think, what is one thing you can do to to work in your heart or move from to the heart space, is learn to trust.
Trust is really, I think this is what has been coming out, has emerged in this conversation. It's that trusting. And so you mentioned about first the slowing down, right? Because of course, if we keep like going, pushing and striving, nothing's going to come out, because we're like stressed out, we're filled with tension, constricted. And second is the allowing, and the trusting that comes. And then what comes with it too is that knowing that everything is relational and interconnected in this life, and that there's always a flow and movement. And that brings me to this thought that there's nothing permanent. So there's impermanence in this world. And one good thing is that if you are in a difficult spot now, it's not going to be there forever. And speaking of the heart, for me, it's also, it's about sensations, it's about emotions, it's about like bringing in that, our five senses, right? It's the touch, the feel, how do we sense the world is, and how do we now internalize that? I think that's how I understand moving from the autopilot of just getting things done. This is action oriented, moving into something where we allow things to be, and just experiencing the world, I guess, no matter how pleasant or unpleasant things come right now. So yeah, so this is very rich, Christine. And I want to wrap this up with a question that I ask all of my guests. And this is, what does making an impact mean for you?
That's a very good question. I start to believe that, and again, living in the heart space, knowing the relational things, not depending too much on my thinking capacity, but also feeling, sensing. I believe we all are interconnected. And I sense more of the wholeness of myself and wholeness with others, wholeness with the world. Making an impact for me is by being truly myself. If I just be truly myself and allow, like, I don't have to fix people. I don't have to tell people what to do. I just be myself. And allowing that, this me with, all the trauma experience, and loving that part of me, that's enough to make an impact. Because it's not about telling people what to do. It's about living the life where people said, oh, that's possible. I didn't know that's possible. And that's for me making an impact. And everything that come out from my mouth or words will coming from that energy, from that space. So I don't have to worry about what I said. I don't have to worry about what I do, because I just gonna be doing it from the being, from expressing who I am, because I'm allowing myself to be fully myself. So it becomes so simple to making an impact. No strategy, no like learning or going to mountains and learning with the, this gurus, or it just be yourself.
I love that. Making an impact in the world by just being who you are. So, Christine, this has been very filling and very heartwarming, I guess, conversation that we have. And I'm so grateful once again for saying yes to this, and for sharing your own knowledge, your own experience about how you navigate through the challenges and difficulties in life, and just learning from all of that. And now you are doing your own part in sharing your work to other people. And so before I end, I want to know is there anything else that you would like the listeners to know?
First of all, thank you, Francis, for these conversations, and I love your reflections. It's so great to hear it from different people, from the way you say it, the way you are saying it back to me. I learned so much from it as well. Yes. So this is just an idea, and see if you can apply it. Not like have to a strategy, but what if everything that you do, what happened, what is what you said or what you move, anything that you do right now is perfect the way they are. It's just complete. It's just what it is for right now at this moment. I just want to leave that for audience.
Thank you once again, Christine. And I hope to have you here back soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you for listening to Big Impact Women. You can read and download a full transcript at bigimpactwomen.com/podcast. If you like this episode and want to hear more, hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app. If you feel moved and inspired, head to iTunes and leave us a review. I love hearing your feedback on how we can continue to grow and evolve the program. I believe when women come together, we can co-create humanity's new story and contribute our gifts to the world. bigimpactwomen.com. Go ahead, make an impact.